The story begins with the fact that we are shown beautiful nature, and the protagonist thanked the creatures. He was so worried that he would have to go to the human city alone, and therefore he is very glad that they went with him. There were various creatures in front of the protagonist, and the guy added that it seemed to him that in this form the animals would stand out. Immediately, the white cat told him not to worry and an outbreak occurred. The animals turned into people and the guy said he didn't like it, he thought he looked weak, but the girl thought he was a real macho, unreal gigachad. The guy was surprised how she knew such words. The protagonist was also very happy and wanted to leave together. After that, we are shown the past as the protagonist walked home from work and died. He thought it was okay, because his life was empty anyway. He had no family or friends. He had nothing to be proud of. An absolutely ordinary life. His name was Aoki Tokiya and that's how he died. Immediately, the protagonist woke up somewhere and someone was surprised by him. God stood in front of the protagonist, and he said that Tokiya had never sinned in his entire life. There are almost no such people. The protagonist, after examining him, realized that a real God was sitting in front of his eyes. It all seemed incredible to him, but after death he found himself in front of God. Tokiya felt that he was exaggerating, to which God replied with a denial. Usually a person will do something bad at least once. He will make excuses for forgotten homework, lie, steal money from his parents' wallet. Over the course of a person's life, many small atrocities accumulate. Tokiya explained that he was just following his parents' orders to be kind and help people, so he always lived for the sake of others. God agreed, but replied that it did not save him from being hit by a car. Immediately, he thought about it and made a decision with a smile on his face. He decided to reward Aoki Tokiya. The protagonist was surprised and God said that he had never received anything in his previous life, so he would give him a gift. He will be reborn into a magical world where there will be adventurers, magical animals, and magical skills. Simply put, the world is a fantasy. The protagonist was surprised, because he had read about it in novels. He didn't know if he would be able to go there himself. God added that he doesn't usually do this, which is why it's a little difficult. He also asked if the protagonist wanted him to give him the opportunity to use all four and not only the elements and alchemy, or to become the god of this world so that all its inhabitants would worship him. Tokiya panicked and shouted that it wasn't worth it, because he wasn't that good at it. God asked if he was sure of this. Most Popadans usually have twinkling eyes when he offers them such a thing. He is still sorry that he died so sadly, so at least he will make him strong. It will give him a strong body so that he does not get sick and will give him the opportunity to understand languages. Immediately, he remembered something and gave something to the protagonist. At that moment, a mysterious seal appeared on Aoki Tokiya's hands. The protagonist was surprised and asked what it was. God replied that it was the magic of the vermin. Thanks to her, his future will be great, because he is a selfless person. Tokiya decided to object and replied that he was not exactly like that. God smiled and said that Tokiya doesn't think about herself at all. All his life, he has put someone else's happiness above his own. Tokiya's eyes lit up. He recalled the past as he worked for others and God asked if the protagonist understood that he could also be angry and happy. God turned around and said that he hoped that in the next life he would stop exhausting himself. The protagonist apologized and thanked God for helping him with his rebirth. He turned around and replied with a smile that Tokiya was really a good guy. Immediately he began to disappear and God said it was time for rebirth. He said goodbye to him and added that it was time for him to do what he wanted. We are shown a mysterious large tree. The protagonist appeared in the hollow at the same moment. Mysterious silhouettes stood around him and everyone was surprised when they saw a man. The protagonist looked around and realized that he was hearing voices and that he had really been reborn, but did not understand why he was a baby. His body and voice are not obeying, and apparently, someone is surrounding him. 10 or 20 people or even more. He couldn't move his lips, he wanted to at least see what kind of world surrounded him. Someone was thinking about the divine tree. An unknown beast took the protagonist and assumed that the divine tree had given birth to a human. The protagonist was very surprised by this. He realized that these were not people and that he had never seen such animals before. Tokiya did not understand why God had sent him to such a world. The giraffe said it was incredible, because they had never had people born before. The koala noted that it was definitely a human, namely a human baby. The beast assumed that the wasp was right when he said that the protagonist was the chosen one. He predicted that the sacred beasts would have to raise a human, and they did not believe in this prediction. The protagonist, listening to all this, did not understand anything. The unicorn said that the baby should be carried to the cradle. Another animal suggested that we just take care of him until he learns to talk. The protagonist was scared when he heard about a couple of years, because he didn't want to be looked after for a couple of years when he was a baby. The protagonist was very ashamed, and his watch on his hand seemed to activate, and there was a flash. The animals covered themselves from the flash and did not understand what kind of magical light it was. The flash passed and the protagonist grew during this moment. He didn't understand anything himself, because literally he had just been a baby. All the animals were shocked by this, because how could he grow up so abruptly, and did not know if an ordinary person could do this. Tokiya was shocked by this and did not know what to say. Another creature immediately appeared, who told them to be quiet, because they were too noisy. The protagonist was surprised, and all the animals stood still. It was an old lamb named Wasp, and the animals asked him how he got here. The protagonist apologized to him, and wanted to say something. Osa replied that he knew that his name was Tokiya and that he was reborn by God. The guy was surprised and asked how he knew about it. The wasp replied that he had seen in a dream. In dreams he sees not only himself, but also everything that has happened or will happen to the village of sacred animals. He added that the guy should come to his senses and then come to him. Immediately, he called Ude and Sadai to him and knocked with his hooves. A snake and a wolf appeared immediately. The wasp told them to bring clothes, because there was a child in front of them. Unlike them, he cannot walk naked. Immediately, the protagonist became very confused and covered up various places. After that, the protagonist was given clothes and brought to the wasp, and the snake knocked on the door. The protagonist looked around the house and saw an old man in front of him, who smiled and said that they would talk calmly here. The guy went into the house and apologized. The wasp laughed a little and said that he would tell you now. Tokiya is located in a place where sacred animals, messengers of God, live. He saw a window behind the ram where the animals were standing near a tree. Wasp added that they call it the village of sacred beasts. The protagonist was surprised by this. The wasp said that all the bound beasts were born of the sacred tree. Therefore, everyone was surprised when Tokiya appeared. The sacred tree protects them, gives them plenty of food, and provides them with everything for life. The protagonist understood why God sent him here. Osa asked what Tokiya could tell him. He knew that it was only what he had seen in his dream. But he does not know the ways of his heart. He asked how he lived, what he was thinking about, and asked to tell Tokiya. The protagonist sat down on a cloud and began his story. After a while, the guy finished and the wasp thought about it. Immediately, he called Sadai to inspect Tokyo, because you need to know how strong he is. The wolf agreed and approached the guy and raised his paw. The wolf was very surprised when he saw everything. Sadai just couldn't believe it. He told Osa that Tokiya is not just a human, his strength surpasses their strength. The protagonist was surprised and asked if he was really that cool. Sadai told him to take a look for himself. This is the bare minimum of information, but he is confident that Tokiya will cope. The protagonist's health is 170,000. Mana is 80 million. Basic skills, superior strength rank 10. Excellent recovery rank 10, invulnerability rank 10. Magic skills, can use all magic, not yet awakened. The protagonist was very surprised by this and asked if it was cool. Sadai said that this is his current status. These words made the protagonist even more surprised. Sadai explained that they call status something that shows its power. What about his status? He is much taller than usual. There is also this magic of time. It can be seen that he grew up so quickly because of it. The protagonist looked at the hand and thought about the magic that God had given him. The wolf approached the wasp and added that time management. God's blessing. A huge mana, and asked the head if he had seen him in a dream. Osa also said that it was the protagonist who would protect their village. The protagonist was surprised and the wasp asked how the guy looks at learning magic. He knew that the guy was young, so it's not surprising if he wants to go on adventures as soon as possible. But without proper preparation, he will quickly wither away. He believes that the protagonist should live with the sacred beasts for a while and learn a lot from them. Of course, they can't keep him by force, and he'll understand if he doesn't want to live with them. The protagonist was surprised by this, and Osa added that Tokiya is a very kind person, since even God loves him. He is sure that the sacred beasts have noticed it too. He looked out the window and saw the animals waving happily at the protagonist, who became even more thoughtful. The protagonist believed that he was really a weak-willed person. He lived trying to do everything so that he would not be hated. He didn't believe in himself, but God gave him magic and a future, and he can't betray his kindness. He wanted to try to live for himself. The protagonist said that he had achieved nothing worthwhile in his previous life. He lived an ordinary life, without even leaving a trace in anyone's memory, and he died. But he loved to see people smile. He thought that he needed nothing but the happiness of others. He often helped grandmothers and other people. And he still holds that thought, but in this world. He clenched his fist and wanted to know what he was really capable of. Using the power given to him by God, he wants to make himself and others happy. The protagonist asked if it sounded strange and looked at the floor. Oase thought for a moment and replied in denial and greeted Tokiya, which made him very happy. Oase thought about what he should provide him with clothes, food and shelter. He entrusted it to Ude and Sadai. He needs teachers and told them to bring Shiryuki here. The snake came into the room and agreed and quickly crawled away. The protagonist was surprised and asked the wasp who Shiryuki was. Sadai tensed up a bit, but immediately Shiryuki said that he was here. A huge cat jumped on the protagonist and knocked him down. She said that the guy was the man from the rumors. She literally beamed with happiness and began to roll the protagonist on the floor with joy. Looking at all this, Sadai asked Wasp if he was sure that Shiryuki was a good choice, because she is not particularly friendly with magic. Oase laughed and replied that everything would be fine. Oase believed that Tokiya would definitely be able to help Shiryuki. She hugged him, but the protagonist was a little scared. After that, we are shown the second day after rebirth. The protagonist, Ude and Shiryuki were on the set to teach magic to Tokiya. Something began to shine and the protagonist was surprised. Ude noted that he was able to use the magic of light. Shiryuki thought she was beautiful, and the guy was even more surprised that he could really use magic. After meeting Shiryuki, he was so tired that he slept until morning, and now Sadai is teaching him magic. The snake noted that he grasps quickly. This is because he has all the magic. The protagonist agreed. He thought magic was fun. He can do so many things with her. Shiryuki noted that Tokiya is capable of anything. He is very special. The protagonist asked what kind of magic Shiryuki uses. The girl wanted to show him and smiled. Immediately huge spikes appeared from the ground, which made the protagonist very scared. Startled, the protagonist fell to the floor and examined the ice spikes. Shiryuki approached the guy and asked if he was okay. She touched him and Tokiya felt cold, because Shiryuki's paws began to freeze. The cat was surprised and the guy asked for forgiveness, because he was a little scared. Immediately, Ude appeared, who was angry at Shiryuki. He viciously asked if she had forgotten that she couldn't control her magic. He had already told her many times not to use it so suddenly. Tokiya is not a beast, but a man. She could hurt him. Shiryuki looked at the protagonist's hand and saw a small abrasion and apologized. The protagonist smiled and said that everything was fine, because he had asked her to show him magic. Tokiya touched the ice and noted that she was so strong and beautiful and asked her if she used ice magic. The cat was very happy and agreed, but she does not control her well, so she will study with him. The protagonist understood her and was glad that they were studying together and said that he would look up to her. Kitty was very happy. She wanted to hug the protagonist, but remembered that her legs were frozen and stopped so as not to harm the protagonist, and he was a little surprised. After that, the protagonist came to the library and was very surprised. He didn't know that she was in the village. Ude said that if he wanted to know about something, he could go to the village library. He can find magic here. Owl said that books from his mainland and all the wisdom of the village are collected here. In addition to the usual books, magic books and history books are stored here. If he wants to learn magic, the best thing would be to take the book from here. The protagonist was surprised and asked where he was. Owl replied that his name was Johann, and he was a librarian. The guy asked with surprised eyes if he had read all these books. Johann laughed and said that it was impossible. He believed that several hundred years would not be enough to read at least half of the books. And he is unlikely to read even a tenth of the library in his entire human life. Johann sat on his wand and asked if he wanted to read the basics of magic. Tokiya agreed and added that he would like to know about the food that is produced in the village of sacred beasts. The owl was surprised and replied that they usually eat what the sacred tree gives them. The protagonist smiled and said that he wanted to read about it too. Immediately, the owl took off and started looking for the book. She got him more than 10 books on the basis of magic, as well as an atlas with food. He took the whole stack, and Johann added that if he needed more books, he just had to call. The protagonist, examining the books, was surprised by their thickness. He wondered how many hours it would take him to read them, so he decided to use acceleration magic. The magic of time, which is subject to him, can speed up time or rewind it. Thanks to the acceleration, he can increase the speed of the actions he reproduces. And now he is increasing the speed of reading books. 500, no, even 1,000 times. At first, he was quite surprised, but now he knows what time magic is and what he can do with it. After that, Johann saw the protagonist looking a little tired. Owl asked if he was tired already and immediately noted that the books were complicated. It was better to read them thoughtfully. The protagonist turned around and replied that he had already finished. The owl was very surprised, and then thought that he was just joking. Immediately, Johann decided to test the protagonist, which part of the body is best suited for casting magic. The protagonist replied that his hands, because of the least chance that he would die as a result of the wrong cast, and this turned out to be the correct answer. And now he wanted to read about food and used acceleration again. The book started turning pages very quickly. Johann was greatly surprised by the speed, and after a moment the protagonist finished. Johann laughed, and his eyes lit up. He was very interested, and he wanted to bring him more books so that he could read as much as he wanted. Johann continued to bring him books so that the protagonist absorbed all the information. It's been 3 whole days and Tokiya is finally done. Johann was shocked, because he had read the entire history of this world, even faster than the sacred beasts. The protagonist realized that people also live in this world. Johann agreed, but added that several hundred years ago there was a war between the 3 races. They haven't seen anyone since. In this world, besides sacred beasts, there are people, demons, and monsters. However, the sacred beasts live in the middle of the mountains in the north, bordering the kingdom of Lingam on the mainland of Alcavia. In the sacred yet unexplored land of the Forbidden Mountains. Simply put, sacred beasts live far, far away, and many consider them just a fairy tale. It was written in the scroll that the land of sacred animals had been invaded only once, a long time ago. During the War of the 3 Races. When the world was on the verge of destruction due to the feuds of monsters, demons and humans, the sacred beasts used a special power and ended the war. The protagonist knew that it was a monstrous war. Exterminated almost all the demons. God clearly took this into account by sending him to the peaceful village of the sacred beasts. Johann said that Tokiya had never seen any other creatures besides the sacred beasts. So he can live, too, considering himself a sacred beast. The protagonist laughed and agreed. Shirayuki immediately came running, and Johann told the protagonist that they had come for him and assumed that he was going to magic training and that he was a persistent student. The protagonist smiled and said that he was a human being, and his life was short, he had a lot to learn. Immediately, he mounted Shirayuki and they quickly galloped outside. Johann was surprised and asked why Tokiya was working so hard if he lived in a completely safe village. After that, Tokiya's training session ended and Ude said that that was it, and that they were progressing rapidly. Shirayuki thought Tokiya was very cool and his gaze fell on Shirayuki's paws. After that, he gathered sticks and logs to make a fire. When the bonfire turned out, Tokiya invited Shirayuki to sit next to him. After a moment, he took out a carrot and quickly chopped it to make soup. The cat looked into the pot and asked what it was. The protagonist replied that he put out the vegetables that the sacred tree gives them, and also put some ingredients there from the outside. He poured the soup into a plate and handed it to Shirayuki to eat together. The cat was surprised to smell this food. She just felt that it was warm. Shirayuki was surprised that he made the soup for Shirayuki's sake. The protagonist also remembered that she was trying so hard not to freeze anyone. Although she has to deal with her own cold most of all. The protagonist took the soup and looked at it with joy. For them, for humans, a warm meal can help hearts get closer. After living in the sacred beast village for a few days, he realized a lot. Sacred beasts are kind creatures who try not to interfere in each other's lives. They don't have any special family or love relationships. They all live independently of each other. But to be connected to someone with a strong bond, and then figure out how he can make him happy. Tokiya is very happy that she is training with him. and that she rejoices with him in her progress, so he learned magic that would help her keep warm. He suggested that she continue to train and eat warm stew. Shirayuki was very glad to hear all this. She had tears of happiness and jumped right at the protagonist. She was very happy, and Ude was standing nearby, eavesdropping, and was glad of their words. She said she loved Tokiya, and he just tickled her. He sat on her, and she dragged him somewhere. Tokiya asked where they were going, and she replied that they were going to the waterfall. She wanted to know if it was really endless. 3 months have passed since then. By continuing his magical training, he quickly achieved a lot. The magic of time helped him to correct mistakes. And so he began to use his powers much more freely. Thanks to Sadai, Yohan and Shirayuki, he got used to life in the village. Immediately they show us huge paws and that someone how huge flew near the trees, that they were already flying away. Shirayuki didn't understand what was going on, what kind of strong wind it was. A huge dragon appeared, who realized what he was like. A human child born of a sacred tree. He was looking at the guy attentively, and Shirayuki was very surprised. The protagonist also did not understand when he saw the black dragon. Since he's in the village, he's also a sacred beast, but he's never seen the dragons here before. The protagonist decided to use the analysis and was greatly surprised by its enormous power. His health was 3 million. Mana is 20 million. Basic skills, excellent health rank 20. Combat skills, divine mastery of martial arts rank 45. The protagonist was even more surprised, because they live in a peaceful village. Sudai and Uday immediately appeared and shouted at him not to approach Tokiya. The dragon saw them, and they said that the dragon was an outcast who killed a man. They ordered him not to dare involve Tokiya in this. This dragon's name is Eugene. He is an outcast who killed a man, and they repeated again that he should not involve the protagonist in this. Tokiya understood that this was a sacred beast that had killed a man. The dragon leaned a little closer, and Sudai and Uday stood in front of Shirayuki and Tokiya, and asked him to be careful. The animals said that he forgot about his duty as a messenger of God, and injured more than one living being. Eugene realized that they were servants of the wasp and asked them to calm down, because he had only come to see how man lived among the sacred beasts. Sudai told them not to listen to the dragon. Eugene pulled back and said that they were stupid sacred beasts who shared a life with a human. Eugene asked them if the war of the 3 races had taught them nothing. He wanted to see how it would turn out for them. Eugene turned back and flew away. Shirayuki was very surprised. Then he looked down and thought that this was the first time he had seen such a sacred beast in the village. It's obvious that he hates people. Uday asked Tokiya if he knew about the war of the 3 races. He said that it happened several hundred years ago. A war between humans, demons, and animals. Many tribes died in the war. It was a real tragedy. History is created by people, demons, and monsters. Everything except the sacred beasts. Messengers of the gods, sacred beasts, are not allowed to interfere in the affairs of other races. But then the world was on the verge of destruction, and the wasp decided that they, the sacred beasts, should intervene. So they participated in a war that could destroy the world. Using the power of sacred beasts, sealed weapons, and magic. But Eugene alone caused a human massacre, destroying an entire country. His heart doesn't look like the heart of a sacred beast. He can harm Tokyo and asked the protagonist not to contact him. The protagonist couldn't believe that there was a sacred beast capable of killing a human. Uday wouldn't lie, but now he has something to think about. The protagonist agreed, and assured that he would not contact Eugene. After that, Shirayuki took the protagonist away and asked if Tokiya was okay. The guy replied that he was a little surprised. He thought that all sacred beasts were good. And it turned out that they can hate and hurt others. She stopped right there and said she didn't think Eugene was bad. The dragon, of course, is often angry, but he is not bad. Especially since he didn't hurt anyone right now. The protagonist thought about it and realized that she was right, because if he wanted to, he could attack him. Eugene doesn't just hate people, maybe he wanted to communicate something. The protagonist activated his supervision and saw that Eugene was a little sad. But that's what he saw. How it really is, he has yet to find out. He wanted to understand Eugene. He told Shirayuki to look for information about the story and about Eugene together. 3 whole days have passed since then. Shirayuki jumped on rocks and ran. She took him to Eugene's cave and told him that he lived here, and Tokiya thanked her. The guy smiled and said that he went, and Shirayuki stayed outside. The protagonist went inside, and it seemed to him that it was very creepy here, and it was also dark. Almost nothing is visible, so he used fire magic. Immediately he saw the dragon, and he asked what he needed. He looked into the dragon's eye and felt a strong pressure. Just looking at his legs began to give way. The dragon said that his sudden visit did not make him angry at all. Since he had come to him despite the warning of the beasts, he had a good reason. The protagonist realized that he was ready to listen to her. He realized that the dragon wasn't going to hurt him. Tokiya told Eugene that he wanted to understand him. He wants to know what he can tell him. Why did he come when he found out that there was a man in the village? And about his true intentions. The protagonist clenched his fist and added that after reading all the books, he realized that he killed people for only one reason. Otherwise, the war would not have ended. Tokiya shouted it clearly and firmly. The dragon did not understand how Tokiya understood this. He is sure that this would not have been written in books. The protagonist agreed. He said that in the books of the sacred beasts, it is written only about the horrors of war and the praising years of the sacred beasts. All the best things have been written. But the past world had taught him that the hatred born of war would not go away if he just showed his strength. The dragon was surprised to hear this and agreed. He still remembers the sight that happened 500 years ago during the War of the Three Races. Initially, he, like other sacred beasts, showed his might to stop the war. After seeing Eugene's strength, everyone ran away and he thought it was good. When he was about to fly away, he noticed a certain force at the last moment and was surprised by it. The dragon noticed that people were using some magic item. The whole city just disappeared and the dragon wondered how they did it. He thought the world was over. Even if they show strength, even if they indirectly interfere with them. The dragon began to destroy the columns and look for people. And then they show us a kind of magic ball and people. Eugene believed that the war would not end. Evil will continue to exist. The dragon got a little angry and emitted fire and destroyed everything. The Dragon King Eugene will be ready to even stop being a sacred beast. That's where Eugene ended his story. The protagonist, after listening to him, realized that Eugene was killing only to end the war. Eugene turned away from embarrassment and said that Tokiya was joking a lot and that he had just wasted his time. Immediately, he bared his teeth and got a little angry. He said that the sacred beasts believe that the world is full of goodness and harmony. But this is not the case. Humans and demons are not as simple as they seem. They are cunning and greedy. The people of this world still create magical items that can destroy the world. Monsters only think about how to eat other creatures. When he heard that a human was born in the village, but the rest of the sacred beasts were completely calm, he was overcome with fear. They don't know what it's like outside the village, so they don't feel the danger. Although Eugene has been called an outcast, he is actually worried about the sacred beasts. And he wants to protect them and this world. There were many treacherous and dirty people on his way, but the sacred beasts turned out to be not like them at all. But because the protagonist decided that he wanted to learn more about all of them. Eugene was surprised and noted that Tokiya should learn more about the world outside, otherwise others might take advantage of his strength and his kindness, and then he would be finished. Immediately the boy laughed, and the dragon was surprised by this and asked what it was. Tokiya was very glad that the dragon was worried about him too. The dragon didn't know what to say to that, but he didn't deny it either. The protagonist thanked Eugene and said that he was glad to talk. He asked the dragon to let him continue chatting with him. The dragon only replied that he would think about it. The guy quickly ran back to the exit of the cave. He saw Shirayuki who was sleeping and quickly sat on her to return home. The protagonist thanked Shirayuki for waiting for him. The cat noted that he looked pleased and asked what he and Eugene were chatting about. The protagonist replied that Eugene asked me to tell him that Shirayuki is a very good friend. Hearing this, Shirayuki was very happy and jumped down from the cliff and landed successfully, which made the protagonist happy. After that, it was late at night, and Osa realized that Tokiya knew about the war. Immediately he stood up and the beast next to him got scared. He asked the wasp not to overdo it, because they can't lose him. Osa said that very soon he would have to return back to the sacred tree and before that he would have time to determine the fate of Tokiya. After that, we are shown that the protagonist trained with dummies near the cave. The mannequins surrounded the protagonist, and he got ready. One of them attacked the guy, but he dodged and hit back. Seeing this, Shirayuki was glad that Tokiya had become so strong. Eugene immediately appeared and agreed with her, but clarified that this was only because he personally trained him. Eugene flew down and went down to the guy. Protagonist smiled, because Eugene had been teaching him every day since that day. He even stopped seeming scary to him. He is easily angered, and he can be rude, but in fact he is kind and slightly awkward, and sometimes boastful. The dragon was surprised that Tokiya was able to defeat the wooden doll that he had made for him, and wanted to test his strength. Shirayuki was surprised by this and asked how he wanted to do it. The dragon only backed away and tilted its head to prepare. Immediately, he fired a lot of fire at the protagonist. Shirayuki was very scared when she saw the real fire breath, and asked if it was too powerful. The protagonist just smiled at this and used the time magic, stasis. The fire just stopped in front of the protagonist. Shirayuki was surprised that the flames had stopped. The dragon noted that he could not only accelerate and reverse time, but also stop it, and was surprised. Immediately, Tokiya began to stagger, and at the last moment, the dragon extended its wings so that Tokiya fell on it. He realized that this magic was different from speeding up and rewinding. The protagonist smiled and noted that this magic takes a lot of strength. The dragon said that it was not worth using this magic during battles in the outside world. He would rather not fight at all. Moreover, who knows if he will go out into the outside world? Perhaps he will live in the village all his life. Immediately, Uday appeared, who was looking for Tokiya. The protagonist was surprised and asked what happened. He looked at Eugene and tensed up a little. Looking at the dragon, he said they needed to talk. Tokiya must come to the sacred tree with Shirayuki. The protagonist noticed that Uday was nervous, which was very rare for a sacred beast. He had a bad feeling about it. Immediately, he started to leave and told Eugene that he would come back later. Literally a moment later, we are shown the divine tree itself, and the protagonist was already there. He was very surprised, because he saw a lot of different animals that greeted him. He even saw Johan outside the library for the first time. Uday stood next to the wasp and said that everyone was there. Immediately, the head told that he had seen a dream. The hour is approaching when he, Uday and Sadai will have to return to the sacred tree. This made everyone very surprised. The beasts began to discuss the news. Sacred beasts live a long time, but still, they die too. When their lifespan comes to an end, they return to the sacred tree. It will be very sad without the wasp next to him, but both Uday and Sadai will leave with him. Tokiya lowered his head down, and Shirayuki called out to him to support him. Uday asked the protagonist to calm down, because they won't disappear right now. Sadai added that due to the sleep of the wasp, they need to resolve some problems as soon as possible. You need to choose the next keeper of the village. To choose the one who inherits the title of defender of the village, and Sadai wondered who would have to bear such a huge responsibility. Osa said that it was the protagonist who would become the new guardian of the village. The guy was very surprised by this. The giraffe asked if he really chose Tokyo. The bear noted that Tokiya was human and asked if he was sure. Uday said that the wasp saw in a dream how he was born from the sacred tree. Sadai added that he also saw that he was granted the right to protect this village, sacred animals, and the whole world. The protagonist shouted for them all to stop, because they are all much stronger and wiser than him. Moreover, he is a human being, which means he will not be able to live as long as they do. And without their protection, he himself. Before he could finish, Uday said that only his soul was important. He's a kind man. Sadai added that this is exactly what is needed for the role of the guardian of the village. The bonds that he has built with Shirayuki and Eugene confirmed these words. Johan intervened and said that Tokiya would be a good keeper. He is diligent and always thinks about others. Shirayuki agreed and noted that Tokiya was very kind. The protagonist was surprised that they would recognize him as the new guardian and the prediction of the wasp. But he didn't know what he could do for all these animals. Osa also added that Tokiya would have to visit the outside world, which surprised everyone and the protagonist. Their village is small, but Tokiya will have to go out into the outside world and learn as much as possible new things. Uday was surprised and asked how the wasp imagined that the future keeper of the village would leave. Osa replied that everything would be fine, because he had seen the future. He never acts rashly. He took the protagonist by the hand and added that if, after the journey, Tokiya himself chooses the path of the guardian of the village, he will only be glad. Tokiya wanted to say something to Osa, but he interrupted and said that he knew how much he wanted to learn more about the outside world. The protagonist listened attentively to the wasp, and Sadai said that the protagonist had been chosen as a guardian and asked what he felt. The protagonist clenched his fist and apologized, because he really wanted to get out into the outside world. And he would like to protect them all, but only after he really fits the role. After all, having only knowledge about the village, he will not be able to protect its inhabitants. He still lives only because he wants to find out what he is capable of in this life, but if he goes to the outside world, he will no longer see Osa, Uday and Sadai. The head asked Tokiya not to cry. Let his free heart lead him along the path that he has chosen. The protagonist was crying, and the wasp was soothing him. Shirayuki thanked Osa, Uday, and Sadai. The head also thought that he was somehow afraid to let him go into the outside world all alone. Immediately, Shirayuki raised her paw and shouted that she was ready. She wanted to travel with Tokyo. The protagonist was surprised and asked if she was sure, because this was her last chance to be with the wasp. The cat said that she loves the wasp and wants to be with him, but she doesn't want to wait all this time for him to return to the village, so she wants to go on a trip with him far, far away. Immediately, someone in the air said that no matter what kind of guardian he was, he would not let him travel, and Shirayuki hugged the guy. It was Eugene who spoke, who flew to the animals. Everyone immediately asked what the hell dragon was doing here. Sadai asked why he came to them, because they don't have time for his tricks and should speak faster. Eugene wanted to explain how the protagonist interrupted him and asked if he wanted to go with him. The dragon was surprised and asked what he was saying ahead of him. The protagonist was smiling sweetly. Eugene realized that he wanted to go with Shirayuki and that in such a company they would be quickly divorced. The outside world is quite dangerous. The protagonist said that if so, then they rely on Eugene. After that, the protagonist told Osa, Uday and Sadai that he was going on a trip with his friends. When he realizes what he is capable of, scouts the outside world, and becomes a guardian to match the village, he will definitely return. Osa was glad to hear that. He doesn't even regret anything. The protagonist asked if they were going to the world where people live. Shirayuki and Eugene will stand out a lot. Shirayuki asked him not to worry about this, and immediately there was a strong flash from which the protagonist already covered himself. In a moment they turned into people. Shirayuki turns into a beautiful girl, and Eugene into a slightly gloomy guy. The protagonist was very surprised that they could do this. Shirayuki replied that it was the secret skill of all sacred beasts, transformation magic. They can transform into both humans and demons. But she loves her ponytail and ears, so she leaves them. Eugene examined himself and decided that this was a weak body, and he did not like it. The protagonist was very happy about this and said that now they can live in the human world. Eugene grabbed Tokiya and Shirayuki and said it was not the time to have fun. They need to prepare for an adventure. Shirayuki also noted that Eugene is a real handsome man. He didn't understand where she got those words from. He looked back and saw the sacred tree and then the beasts that were saying goodbye to him. So they left the village. They don't know where the end of their path lies, but they don't worry. A whole world of limitless possibilities. He had a feeling that it wouldn't go that far. Shirayuki thought it was cool, because everything was not like in the village. Eugene said he wouldn't believe she hadn't been here. The protagonist also looked around and realized that there are much denser forests here than in the village. Eugene said that because the village is maintained in perfect condition for the sacred animals to live in it. All this correctness makes me sick. The protagonist laughed and said that the forests in the village were neat. Then they walked forward and Shirayuki ran ahead singing songs. Immediately, the dragon told them to stop and the protagonist agreed. There was someone in the bushes and Eugene shouted for Tokiya to act and he agreed. Wolves ran out of the bushes and the protagonist was surprised. The guy stood in a stupor and could not harm them. Eugene managed to intervene using the magic of the fiery purgatory, dead end. The protagonist was sorry looking at it. The wolves were unharmed and Shirayuki wanted to add more ice magic to them. The protagonist asked Shirayuki not to kill them. She turned around and the wolves, realizing that they should run away, quickly ran away. The guy sat down on the floor and turned away. He almost started crying and apologized to them. Shirayuki ran up to him and told him that everything was fine. That's what happens to you when you first feel someone else's thirst to kill. Eugene also noted that monsters like creatures with a large supply of mana. Since he has a lot of it, they see him as a good food source. The protagonist agreed and thanked them for not killing the wolves. It's hard to watch someone die, even if they're monsters. Even in the previous world, he could not watch the death of animals. And in this, He was always close to the sacred beasts. He also thanked Eugene for noticing the monsters. He was a little embarrassed and agreed. He was glad they were with him, but he knew he had to learn how to fight himself. On a log and asked what they would eat, grass or something. The protagonist jokingly repeated his words and raised his hand. He used the magic of the pocket dimension, space. Eugene was surprised and asked when he learned to use it. The protagonist replied that he had read the book 200 times, practiced 500 times, and that was it. Very convenient magic. The protagonist pulled his hand into the pocket dimension and said that he had finally found it.